October is now in full swing, which also means that I start doing some Halloween-themed games because, there's a lot of them to cover. This week I take a look at one I've never heard of, but got in a fanatical deal last year. Dead Effect, a zombie shooter in space. Think Doom 3 and you got the general idea. When you start the game up, you actually get a pretty neat intro video that acts as a trailer of sorts. It's a pretty good setup to the idea and atmosphere of the game, and then you get thrown into the menu screen. You get to choose from one of two characters to play as. I'm not sure if the story changes any between them since I only ever played as the male character, but each also starts out with different types of weaponry. Although when you actually begin the first level, you don't begin with the guns shown. Instead, you're given a futuristic style of taser and then find the pistol later on, and then the rifle or SMG in the following stage. You're not stuck with just those weapons. Other firearms can be purchased from the in-between level shops by using the gold and credits that you find throughout each stage. One thing I will say off the bat, it is clear that this was a mobile game that was ported to PC. There are clear remnants of the mobile source, such as the pause and help buttons on the top left of the HUD that cannot be clicked in any way, at least not any way I could find. Even more noticeable are the controls. Overall, they're fine with your typical FPS mechanics, but what feels wonky that takes some getting used to is the aiming. It's fairly floaty, and the acceleration always feels a bit too high when trying to scope around. I've learned as I've gotten further into the game to not even waste my time with the iron sights and just hip fire, using the crosshair as a general idea on where to aim. Headshots are still fairly easy to obtain, and usually you'll be going up against small groups of zombies. So if headshots aren't your thing, just aim center mass and fire in bursts. Simple stuff. The game isn't overly complicated with perks, hundreds of weapons, and upgrades, so aiming and shooting should be enough for any player, hardcore FPS fan or casual RPG nut alike. There are a couple of different types of undead you'll come across, and one type of creature that I wouldn't call a zombie. You have your standard walkers, and then the stereotypical overweight ones that spit red blobs at you. Blood, I'd assume. There are some with biohazard suits on that are a bit more armored, and then soldiers that are also armored but fall easily to head blasts. The more dangerous of all are the grenade throwers, which should be taken out immediately. You'll know one is around when the game randomly goes into a slow-mo effect for a few seconds, as every grenade blast does this, including when you throw them. It's cool at first, but kills the flow of the game after a few times. It is a nice early warning system though, as one of these grenades can easily wipe you out immediately if you aren't aware that the zombie is around. Fortunately, you have infinite lives. Well, sort of. If you go down during a level, you get a few options. You can restart the stage, in which it's not the end of the world because stages can usually be cleared in 10 to 15 minutes. Or even better, you can resurrect yourself, at a cost. It seems that the further in the level you are, the more credits it will cost you to get back on your feet. I like this system as it does tend to work well in a game like this. Your health, by default, does not restore on its own. Instead, you'll need to find these med bays to get back into tip-top shape. When you obtain 20 gold pieces, you can purchase the auto-replenish, so it's like almost every other modern shooter, and I do enjoy the fact that it's an optional purchase. The only other use for gold is to buy some weapons in the shop that I'd assume are vastly overpowered. There are some minor upgrades you can perform on your character, and these are done at augmentation stations. These appear about halfway through the game, and truthfully, feel kinda tacked on, like the developers were halfway through the game and thought, why not add some extra customization options? It includes stuff such as moving faster, more life, carrying more ammo, etc. More life is always beneficial, as is moving faster. That's because your sprint is mostly useless. I know what you're thinking. How in the hell is a sprint useless? Well, maybe it's bad phrasing, because the sprinting itself isn't so bad. It's more so the problem with the stamina bar. See, there's two ways you can use your stamina, running and dodging, which is done by double tapping the A or D keys to sidestep. It's very helpful when you see a grenade coming your way, but it does take out a chunk of your stamina. The problem is that your stamina gauge takes forever to refill. You can sprint maybe a maximum of one wall to another in a room, which is hardly optimal, but then it takes a good minute or two for the bar to fill back up. In the augment chambers, There is no option to increase recovery time, so I hardly ever bothered to use the sprint. Saying that, there's not often a lot of need for it, except for maybe having to backtrack from being overcome by a small horde, but this doesn't happen a lot. So let's talk about the shop. It's easy enough to use, although the interface is a bit clunky, and clearly another leftover from the mobile source. You need to use the mouse wheel in order to cycle through the weapons, and you can't just click the weapon you want to see. Instead, you have to use the wheel to center the weapon, stop scrolling, and then the weapon will highlight for you to check its stats and potentially purchase it. The upgrade system, thankfully, is much more straightforward. You have 4 different stats: damage, reload speed, accuracy, and magazine size. Normally it's not a big deal in FPS games, but I highly recommend upgrading the reload speed stats for your weapons. It proves invaluable, as it feels like weapons take too long to slap in a new clip. Maybe I'm just used to modern FPS games giving you the option of reloading in a second flat, but it does help lend to the atmosphere of being helpless on a spaceship full of zombies. Although one quirk with the reload that bothered me the entire game was the animation and sounds accompanying them don't sync up properly. Take a listen. It just feels wrong, and something that just irritated me throughout my entire playthrough. Although the game does give off a heavy, cheesy, B-grade movie feeling, I love it. The story is practically non-existent, but the vocal conversations between the main character and the mad scientist villain are priceless. For some reason, the villain speaks like Arnie, and I felt that the accent became more pronounced the further into the game you got, getting to the levels of crazy in the final encounter with him. And spoiler alert, the ending is probably the best that I've ever seen in a game. I'm even gonna let you watch it just now. Isn't that beautiful? Don't get me wrong, this low budget feel isn't a detriment to the game. It actually fits perfectly. The game doesn't try to be something it's not, which is what I would consider to be a casual zombie slaying FPS game. There's only 12 stages, and overall the game can realistically be completed in about 2 hours. And that's even with smashing open cabinets, which is kind of annoying because you just mash a spacebar to open them, but also looking for hidden wall orbs and cash. The orbs I found out you can shoot by accident, and it's the collectible of the game, opening up some strange backstories to each of the zombie types in the menu. The graphics were well done and set the mood, although there are some frame rate jitters here and there. You do get access to a flashlight to light up areas if needed, but I didn't find it a requirement often, as usually the ship's corridors are dark but still enough lights are on to show your way. And once you complete the game, you can keep going to unlock further weapons, upgrades, and so on. Or maybe even check out the other character, because why not? Overall, Dead Effect isn't going to take the place of games like Dead Space, but it's a fun little romp while it lasts. I've played completely through it twice, once when I first bought the game, and once when I got the footage from this review. I remember only spending a single dollar on it, which I'd say is a bargain for the gloomy atmosphere, simplistic elements, and laughable story. But bargain or not, it's still a fun game to kill an afternoon, and I'd actually recommend it because, as I said, it doesn't try to be anything that it's not. I do own the sequel, but haven't tried it yet. Maybe next year? Final score? 5 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.